Treach! Stripper, striker Baron lashed to the post. Oh, devil!
Back in a time when human beings were treated no better than animals, Solomon Northup was a free African-American man living peacefully in New York with his wife and 2 children. He was a talented musician and well-respected in his community, and made a living playing the violin. One day, a friend introduced him to 2 white men named Brown and Hamilton, who offered him a job to perform in Washington, D.C.
We could give you $1 for each day's services and $3 for every night played at our performances.
An impressive amount in those days. Tempted by the offer, Solomon agreed and traveled with them to Washington. That night, they all went to a restaurant for ate and drank.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
But the next morning, Solomon woke up in a dark cell, his hands and feet chained. He quickly realized that the men had drugged his drink. Soon, 2 strangers came.
I'm a free man.
But they accused him of being a runaway slave from Georgia, not a free man from New York.
You're just a runaway nigger.
Despite his protests, they beat him with a whip. He wasn't alone. There were other black men and even a family, a mother with her son and daughter, all held as captives. They were all loaded onto a ship to be transported elsewhere. That night, while everyone was sleeping, a white man entered their cabin and forced the woman to go with him. Helpless and scared for her children, she had no choice. When one of the other men tried to stop him, the white man stabbed him to death. By morning, the man's body was thrown into the ocean. Because in this cruel world, a slave's life was worth nothing.
Better than us.
After getting off the ship, all the captives were made to sit in a line while their names were called one by one. Whenever a name was called, the person stood up. But when the name Platt was called, no one responded. The man calling names walked over to Solomon and asked why he didn't stand.
My name's not Platt. My name...
Solomon stayed silent. Then they were taken to a house filled with other slaves, like a showroom, except instead of clothes or shoes, it was human beings being sold. They were stripped completely naked, men and women. Bidding began, and a man named Ford bought Solomon and also purchased a woman who had 2 children. She begged him to buy her kids too, promising to serve him for life. So Ford tried to buy her daughter, but the seller refused.
No, I cannot sell the girl.
Because she could fetch a much higher price later. The mother was torn from her children, crying in agony, but no one cared. If Ford sounds cruel, he was actually one of the few white men in the film who showed any mercy. Now Solomon's name was changed to Platt. No one knew his real identity. One fellow slave warned him to never reveal he was a free man or that he could read and write, or he might be killed. Here, their daily work involved cutting trees, processing wood, and other harsh labor. Though Solomon was intelligent and educated, he tried to hide it, but it naturally showed in his personality. Because Ford was somewhat kind, Solomon hoped to earn his trust, and, with his help, find a way to escape and reunite with his family. At the plantation, the workers often used transport to move the woods, and one day, Solomon suggested they could use the waterway to carry them over long distances. It would save money and effort.
Are you an engineer or a nigger?
He then told the master it wouldn't work, that the water was too shallow and the woods would drown. Solomon insisted the water was 10 to 12 feet deep and could be crossed safely. Ford, the plantation owner, told Solomon to prove it by forming a team. Solomon successfully completed the task, which impressed Ford so much that he gifted Solomon a violin. But this success made the supervisor furious. Not because Solomon did something wrong, but because he did something right. When Solomon later built a wooden structure, the supervisor claimed it was full of flaws.
If there's something wrong, it's wrong with the instruction.
This made the supervisor explode in rage. He pulled off his belt and ordered Solomon to remove his shirt. Another overseer arrived and broke up the fight. When he asked what happened, Solomon lied, saying the man tried to punish him over a tool he'd used. The overseer warned him to stay put and left with the other man. But shortly after, 3 men returned, including the supervisor Solomon had beaten. They tied his hands and feet, looped a rope around his neck, and hanged him from a tree. Solomon struggled for breath, barely surviving. Just in time, the same overseer who had earlier saved him returned with a gun and ordered them to back off.
William Ford holds the mortgage on Platt. If you hang him, he will lose his debt. You have no claim to his life.
This wasn't about Solomon the man. It was about a slave who was expensive property. The men left, but not before the supervisor leaned in close and warned Solomon, "I won't forget this." Even after Solomon was nearly lynched, the man who saved him didn't cut him down. He remained hanging from the tree for hours, his hands and feet tied, a noose tight around his neck, barely staying alive by balancing on the tips of his toes. People walked by, going about their business as if nothing had happened, because to them, his life had no value. Finally, after several hours, his master Ford arrived, rushed to cut the rope, and took Solomon back to his house. Ford told him, "That supervisor won't stop now. He'll kill you."
It's no longer safe for you here.
Ford revealed he had sold Solomon to keep him alive. Solomon pleaded, "I was a free man before I came here. Please send me back to my home."
Trying to save your life.
But Ford replied that he couldn't help. He was in debt himself and had no power to save him. The only thing he could do was keep Solomon alive by sending him elsewhere. Solomon was then transferred to a new plantation where the work involved picking cotton. But his new master, Edwin Epps, was brutal. Every evening, the slaves were weighed. Anyone who picked less than 100 pounds of cotton was whipped. There was one woman named Patsey who picked up to 250 pounds a day, more than anyone else. Epps admired her for her strength,
Queen of the field she is.
but also had wicked intentions toward her, which wasn't unusual. For slaves, dignity didn't exist. They were used however their owners pleased. One night, while all the slaves were trying to rest,
Get up! We dance tonight! Get up!
they were taken to Epps's house where he ordered them to dance. This too had become normal. The master would summon them whenever he wanted entertainment. None of them wanted to dance, especially after laboring from sunrise to night. But even their few moments of rest weren't theirs to keep. While the slaves were dancing, Epps's wife suddenly grabbed a bottle and smashed it across Patsey's face, making her scream in pain. Patsey was still young, and Epps's wife knew her husband had disgusting intentions toward her. Out of jealousy and anger, she demanded he sell Patsey, but Epps refused.
She picked with more vigor than any other nigga.
The real reason, though, was that he wanted to continue abusing her. Epps's wife, just as cruel, once called Solomon and handed him a list, telling him to go to the market. Before sending him off, she asked if he could read or write. Solomon lied and said no. She snapped back, "You don't need to. You're here to be a slave. Try anything else, and you'll be whipped." On the way to the market, worn down by misery, Solomon thought about escaping. He turned toward the woods and started to run, but not far along, he saw white men hanging slaves from trees. They stopped him, asking where he was going and who owned him. Solomon replied that he was headed to the market and that he belonged to Epps. They looked at the tag hanging around his neck, a small plate every slave wore like a dog collar. Then they let him go. It sounds cruel, but that was the truth of those times. The other slaves weren't so lucky. They were hanged without mercy. Realizing what could have happened to him, Solomon went straight to the market, bought the supplies, and returned to Epps's wife. He wanted to live, because the only thing keeping him going was the hope of one day seeing his family again. Years passed, and life under slavery dragged on. Day after day of suffering, abuse, and cruelty. But Patsey now being raped every night by Master Epps, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. One night, she came to Solomon, handed him a stolen ring belonging to the mistress, and said, "Keep this, but I need a favor in return." When Solomon asked what she meant, Patsey begged him to kill her, to take her to the fields and hold her underwater until she stopped breathing.
I will do no such thing.
She said, "If I can't buy my death, then please give it to me as a gift." Solomon was stunned. He replied, "I can't do that." But she pleaded again, saying she had nothing left to live for, no future, no hope. She couldn't endure this anymore. Still, Solomon refused, and Patsey walked away in silence. Meanwhile, for 2 years straight, the cotton crop failed, and Epps suffered heavy financial losses. Out of desperation, he sent all his slaves to work on a sugarcane plantation owned by a judge. There, Solomon got a chance to play the violin at a wedding and earned a little money. After some time, the slaves were sent back to Epps's farm, where the same brutal routine started again. Anyone who picked less than 100 pounds of cotton was whipped, and Solomon often fell short, so he was beaten regularly. Around this time, a new worker joined them. Not a black man, but a poor white man working for money. Yet even here, there was discrimination. When black slaves failed to meet the quota, they were whipped. But when the white man picked only 29 pounds, no punishment followed.
I'm sure in time we'll develop as a picker.
Since the white man worked alongside the slaves, he gradually became friendly with them. One day, Solomon approached him and asked for help. He explained that he wanted to write a letter and needed him to mail it. In return, Solomon offered money he had earned playing violin at a wedding. The white man agreed, took the money, and told Solomon to give him the letter in 2 days. It was a dangerous plan. If their master found out, both of them could be killed. But Solomon was desperate. A few nights later, Epps approached him, drunk and holding a knife. He said, "I heard one of my slaves can read and write." Solomon stayed calm and asked what he meant. Epps accused him of trying to give a letter to someone. Solomon denied it, saying the man was lying because he wanted to become a supervisor and was making up stories to win favor. Epps bought the excuse and replied, "I would have killed him, but he's one of us," and walked away. After he left, Solomon quietly burned the letter he had written with so much hope, his only chance to reach home, to prove he was a free man. As the paper turned to ash, so did his dreams and the last pieces of hope he was holding on to. Instead, he returned to the same brutal life, beaten, humiliated, and stripped of dignity. And now, he couldn't even trust anyone anymore. Time kept passing, and one day, Patsey suddenly disappeared. Epps panicked, thinking she had escaped, and searched everywhere. But after a while, she returned, which made him angry and suspicious. He asked where she had gone, and she said she was just in the fields, but Epps didn't believe her and started beating her. Solomon tried to step in, and Epps struck him too. That's when Patsey finally confessed the truth. She had gone to Master Shaw's nearby plantation because she had no soap to bathe with.
I stink so much to make myself gay.
Still, Epps's rage didn't calm down. He tied Patsey to a tree, stripped off her clothes, and handed Solomon a whip.
Give her the whip. Give it all to her.
Solomon didn't want to, but he had no choice. He started whipping her slowly, but Epps got even more furious and pulled a gun on Solomon's head and screamed, "Hit her until she bleeds, or I'll kill all of you." Forced to obey, Solomon whipped Patsey until her back was raw and bloody. Then Epps grabbed the whip himself and beat her so viciously that she collapsed, unconscious, her body soaked in blood. The cruelty shattered Solomon's spirit completely. That night, heartbroken and hopeless, he destroyed his violin, the one piece of his life that still gave him meaning. Around that time, a new white worker named Bass arrived. He wasn't a slave. He was just working for wages. Bass was kind and fair. One day, while working under the sun with the slaves, Epps offered him some liquor to refresh himself. Bass politely declined, and Epps immediately sensed something different about him, something that didn't sit right in his gut. So Epps looked at Bass and said, "If there's something on your mind, speak up." Bass calmly replied, "You can see the sweat and exhaustion on me, but you ignore the pain of the slaves who've worked for you for years."
They ain't hired help. They're my property.
Bass said, "Just imagine. What if one day the tables turn and you become someone's slave? How would that feel?" Epps laughed it off, saying that could never happen, but Bass insisted, "I'm just asking you to think." Solomon watched this exchange quietly and realized that Bass was a good man. One day, while working, Bass asked him if he had anything he wanted to say.
I'm afraid to tell you.
He'd already been betrayed by another white man, but eventually, he opened up. He confessed, "I'm not a slave. I was born a free man, but tricked and kidnapped into this life. If you can send a message to my family, maybe I can be free again." Bass admitted it was dangerous, not just for Solomon, but for himself too, but agreed to help. He said, "If it gives you freedom, I'll be glad I did it." After a few months, Bass left. Then one day, while Solomon was working in the field with the others, a horse-drawn carriage arrived. Two men stepped out, and one was a sheriff. The officer walked over and asked the group,
Where's the ball called Platt?
Solomon stepped forward. The sheriff pointed to the man beside him and asked, "Do you know this gentleman?" When Solomon looked closely, his eyes lit up.
Mr. Parker.
Mr. Parker was the man who owned the store in New York where Solomon and his family used to shop. The sheriff asked, "Is Platt your real name?" Solomon answered, "No, my real name is Solomon Northup." The sheriff questioned him further, and Solomon gave correct answers to every detail. Finally convinced, they realized he was a free man who had been enslaved through deception. Overwhelmed, Solomon embraced Mr. Parker and broke down in tears. As Solomon was about to leave with Mr. Parker, Epps tried to stop him, but Mr. Parker warned, "If you lay a hand on him, I'll ruin you in court." Epps backed off, and Solomon finally walked away from the nightmare. Just then, behind him, Patsey called out his name. He turned, walked back, and embraced her. She broke down in tears, knowing this was the last time they'd ever see each other. Solomon was finally free, but Patsey remained trapped in that living hell, where she was forced to work all day, beaten mercilessly and repeatedly assaulted. Her life would continue in pain while Solomon returned home. When he arrived, everything had changed. His children were grown, his daughter was married, and he had a grandson named Solomon Northup Stanton. Overwhelmed with emotion, he hugged his family tightly,